Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Tom Jensen. My guest this week is a familiar face. Wildlife Division Chief Jeb Williams joins us. We're going to talk about the upcoming firearms deer season. Jeb, a lot fewer licenses available this year again.
Yeah, unfortunately, Tom, we're down, and I think that the public would like to see more deer out on the landscape. We issued the lowest number of licenses since the late 70s, and so it's a different ball game for folks out there that have been used to a pretty good deer population for the last number of years.
Right. Is the herd going in the right direction, though?
Well, I think in some places it is. We have made some pretty significant cuts, since 2007, really. Sure. I mean, it's when the population kind of peaked and our license numbers peaked at just below 150,000 licenses. We have been on a pretty steady decline since, and the majority of those licenses that we have cut back on have been in the antlerless area, and so we've made some significant cuts. In some areas they weren't significant enough to where we have to continue to do that, but anecdotally, we hope that we've hit the bottom of the deer numbers and to where we can start working back up.
Jeb, let's talk about the upcoming season. Just in generalities, what can hunters expect? Well,
I think for the individuals that were fortunate enough to draw a license, Tom, I think they're going to have a good quality hunt. We know that in most units throughout the state that there are good pockets of deer in some of those units. However, things have changed since when we're comparing deer numbers to the late 70s or the early 80s, is that in some deer units we don't necessarily have so much of a deer problem as maybe we have an access problem, to where a lot of the deer might be hanging and holding on particular places that the majority of the public may not have access to, and so that can be a challenge when we're trying to issue licenses and try to get some good public opportunity out there, but then also recognizing that by issuing some of those licenses, the public might not have the opportunity where the deer actually are. So it's a challenge, but I think in most units across the state, we have pockets to where there's good deer numbers, which we can hopefully build on into the future to get that deer herd going back up.
I would guess that's kind of habitat driven?
It is,
yeah.
It absolutely. There's no doubt that it's habitat driven, where there is still good habitat associated in some of those particular deer units, and so there's no doubt the landscape has seen some changes when it comes to what the landscape can hold in regards to the number of deer.
You do, of course, have some areas that are a little bit slower to rebound.
We do. We've seen some of the eastern units, again, where the majority of cuts have come in the last couple of years, kind of the eastern part of the state where we've really had some issues as far as trying to stabilize the deer population in that eastern part of the state. So some pretty significant cuts over the last couple of years have continued to be the norm there, and again, hopefully we can start seeing that number at least stabilize and eventually go in the other direction.
The mule deer herd was a big concern for a long time. In fact, we gave out 0 mule deer doe tags there for a couple of years. Is that working?
Well, it appears to be, Tom. In conjunction, of course, with some nice winter weather that we've had these last couple of years in the western part of the state. As we've talked about a lot in the past, mule deer are definitely slower to rebound. They're not as their reproductive capability isn't as high as what white-tailed deer are, so it does take them a little longer to rebound. And so if we can be really conservative with those antlerless licenses, which we have, again this year we did not issue any antlerless licenses, but I think it might be fair to say that this may be the last year of that. We have really noticed some nice increases, especially in the southern Badlands, to where there's going to be some opportunity to be had probably next year in that antlerless population, and as we're seeing the numbers probably high enough to where they might be starting to put some pressure on some private landowners in that area.
A couple of years ago, Jeb, the actual deer harvest lagged behind primarily because the crop harvest lagged behind. It was a very wet October. Do you know where the crop harvest is at now, and how is that going to affect our our hunt this year?
Sure, yeah. So the last number of years, North Dakota has obviously seen an increased number of row crop acreage. Less sunflowers out there, but an additional number of corn acres, of course, with the high corn price the last number of years. Of course, that has kind of come down, but there's still a good amount of corn acres on the landscape. And so what appears this fall is that by deer season, by November 6th, we might have some corn out there, but it's probably not going to be very much. Right now, individuals are getting a pretty good start on corn harvest out there, and so I think by deer season, it's probably safe to say that a high number of corn acres is probably not going to impede anyone's success when it comes to deer hunting this year.
The past few years, Jeb, we've had some issues with disease in the deer herds, EHD, CWD. Where are we at on that?
Well, fortunately this year, Tom, we did not receive a single report on EHD. Now, not saying that it didn't happen, but we did not receive any public reports, and the public has always been very good when it comes to EHD as far as letting us know, and so we can get individuals down there to do some sampling and collection of those dead deer, and we did not receive a report, and so that's a very good thing. We've had our fair share of EHD in the last 5 years in southwest part of North Dakota, so that was definitely a good thing. CWD, of course, continues to be a concern for the department. All of our CWD positives have been in the Unit 3F2, and we hope that at some point in time we will not be receiving any positives, but that's probably not real likely. We know that once CWD is on the landscape that there's probably going to be continued positives out there, but the good news associated with CWD in North Dakota is it has been contained to the Unit 3F2 down there, so it has not spread into other units, and of course that is a positive. Of
course, that CWD has made you kind of tinker with the baiting regulations, of course, in areas around 3F2.
It has, yeah. That is one of the things that we always said, that with baiting, if we did have a disease concern or disease risk, and of course baiting can add some challenges to any type of disease risk out there, and so there are 5 units where there are baiting restrictions that are in place because of the CWD concern.
All right. Any new rules, regulations people need to be aware of?
No, for the most part, Tom, things are kind of as is what they've been in the past, but we always remind people to make sure to read up in the guide and the proclamation to make sure they're familiar with all the current rules and regulations.
Okay. Should be a good season if you got drawn.
For those individuals fortunate enough to draw a license, I think they're going to have a really quality year.
All right, Jeb, thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Here are a few suggestions to help you get ready for the firearms deer season, which starts at noon on Friday, November 6th and ends on Sunday, November 22nd. First off, find your license now. Don't wait until the last minute. If you realize you can't find it now, you can still get a replacement license by contacting the Game and Fish Department. Make sure your firearm is working properly. Take it out, sight it in, make sure all the moving parts are working. Familiarize yourself with all the rules and regulations pertaining to the deer season. Read the proclamation. Make sure you understand the do's and don'ts for hunting deer in North Dakota. Make sure you know how to properly tag your harvest. If you're successful, there are ways to tag a doe and a different way to tag a buck. Also, make sure you know the rules about transporting your deer, or if you're going to transport an animal for someone else. And most of all, this season, be safe. For Jeb Williams and the rest of the staff here at North Dakota Game and Fish, thanks for joining us for Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.